All right, we are live. Let me know if there's any difficulty with hearing me or seeing me there in the comment section. Good to see everybody, and doing a stream here on the second channel. So make sure you're subscribing and commenting and helping the second channel grow and reach more people. We're going to be doing more theological content on this one, whereas the other channel is going to be focused more on current events and politics and things of that sort. And so that way, for algorithm purposes, we can kind of have different topics and different themes spread out for different channels. And that will actually help the algorithm for both channels rather than confusing it. And so make sure that you're subscribing here, hitting the like button, commenting, participating, sharing it, all that good stuff. Okay, so yeah, there's some stuff going on today. Wow, this is a historical moment that we're witnessing. Um, some are going to hail this as something wonderful. Others are going to be horrified by it. Sarah Mullally has now just become officially enthroned as the first Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the Church of England, the Anglican Church. We already knew that she was elected, but she had not yet been enthroned. It had not yet been made official, if you will. Just happened today. We just witnessed it. I'll show you a clip of it here in just a moment. And then we're also going to talk about a cardinal, high-ranking Vatican cardinal, who is saying that the Catholic Church can go no longer without having women's ordination. And so he's calling for it, whereas others are saying, wait, hold on, isn't that heretical in Catholicism? How does this even work? How can a cardinal even call for such things in light of what Pope John Paul II has taught about women's ordination? So we'll have that conversation as well. Let's go ahead and dive into this first part here. Let me show you an actual video of this. Let me share my screen. Please let me know if there's any difficulty with hearing or seeing the content. You should be able to see it right around now. Let me go ahead and make some adjustments here. There we go. Okay, and let's watch this together.
I solemnly commit myself before you to the service of the Church of England, the Anglican Communion, and the whole Church of Christ throughout the world, that together we may proclaim the gospel of Christ, who reconciles us to God and breaks down the walls that divide us.
Let us greet our newly installed Archbishop.
So they're all applauding. Now, keep in mind, pretty much half of the Anglican Church is already broken off because of this. They've already said, we don't want any part of it. So they've broken off and started their own thing because they say, we can't be a part of this because, the church has never allowed for women's ordination. Jesus didn't have any women priests or anything like that. Jesus didn't authorize it, so we can't do it. And so if you're going to take this step, then we're going to have to break communion with you. And so this has already fragmented the Anglican Church even further beyond what it already was. I'm sorry, is that a man or a woman? I'm not trying to be funny. I'm honestly confused. Okay, so yeah, you can see what's going on here. Like I said, this is going to be incredibly controversial. Look, the Anglican Sea began nearly 1400 years ago because Pope Gregory the Great sent Augustine of Canterbury, not Augustine of Hippo, Augustine of Canterbury, to evangelize the English people and become the first Archbishop of England. And he installed his ministry right there in Canterbury and began in this historical spot where she is now enthroned. And, for 1400 years, only a man has sat on that episcopal throne. Now, of course, from the Catholic perspective, there's been a big debate on whether or not they have maintained apostolic succession and ordination of bishops, especially since the time of the Reformation. Some of the Orthodox are less hesitant on that question and accept their ordinations. Others within the Catholic Church have noted, well, it looks like maybe some valid orders have been inserted into their ordination services via the old Catholics that broke away from the Catholic Church after Vatican I. So there's kind of a debate on Anglican orders in light of that situation. But, what's not going to be debated is the question of, women's ordination. Well, actually, it is being debated now, right? What should not have been debated is actually now starting to be debated. But whatever confusion there was and whatever question mark there was on Episcopal ordinations and priestly ordinations in Anglicanism before, there's even much more so going to be those questions now, especially with the leading figure of the Anglican Church being now a female. So this is absolutely historic. Some might argue, however, unfortunate at the same time. But regardless of what your perspective is on it, we are certainly witnessing history. We live in really interesting times, to say the very least. Now, like I said, this isn't uniquely an Anglican thing. I mean, you even have Eastern Orthodox who are calling for women's ordination. I recall reading very, very prominent Orthodox canon lawyers saying, the question hasn't been closed. I remember Callistus Ware, back when he was alive, I actually had the chance to interview him. And I remember him taking the position, well, technically, women's ordination isn't closed in Eastern Orthodoxy. Now, in some circles, they already have Eastern Orthodox women deaconesses that are, obviously female deaconesses, but the question of the priestly ministry, there's still, an open question there in Eastern Orthodoxy. Whereas for Catholicism, you would think the issue was settled back when John Paul II released Ordinatio Sacerdotalis, saying definitively, and even kind of using ex cathedra language, but saying infallibly, this is infallibly established that women cannot be ordained to the presbyterate, to the priesthood. So they can't become priests. And that would also then include bishops. The question of deaconesses was not addressed in the document. But there have been a number of cardinals since then, high-ranking cardinals in the Vatican, who have said, we can kind of revisit that. And though Pope Francis was not open to women's ordination, he did use some language in his dubia response to Cardinal Burke. This suggested the question of women's ordination in Ordinatio Sacerdotalis. We can take a second look at it, was effectively what he told Burke, which is an odd thing because, again, how can you take a second look at something that the document says is infallibly established? How can this be studied further? That was the language that he used, studied further. How exactly can you study this further? And the context of the question was, can women's ordination change? And he said this can be studied further. So we've seen that. We've seen that from popes. We have seen even Pope Leo XIV now saying that the teaching on women's ordination can change. He says he's not going to change it, or at least he doesn't have plans to change it at this time, is what he said. But he said it can change. So again, there's kind of this question of how can something that a document calls infallible change? Popes, even cardinals, are indicating it can. But how? So there's a big debate here. And, what I have seen is a temptation on part of some online Catholics to try to dunk on the Anglicans. And they'll say, come home to Rome and all that. Look, People who are taking that kind of approach, maybe they're just acting in good faith and they're just really ignorant, but they need to be aware that those debates in the Anglican Church are now in the Catholic Church and are at the highest quarters of the Catholic Church. So this isn't a time to be triumphant and try to dunk on people. This is a time to be humble because those conversations are right here in the Catholic Church. Let me show you what this cardinal is saying. And this isn't the first time he has called for women's ordination. But Cardinal says the church cannot continue to exist without women's ordination. Cardinal Holeric has said that he cannot see how the Catholic Church can endure in the long term if women continue to be excluded from ordained ministry. He was speaking at a symposium, and he said, I cannot imagine how a church can continue to exist in the long term if half of the people of God suffer. Notice that language, suffer, because they do not have access to ordained ministry. So he's putting it in terms of there's an injustice here. They're suffering. So he's not having the conversation in terms of, is this authorized? Is this going against infallible teaching? Is this against the deposit of faith? For him, he puts it in terms of, this is an injustice. This is a sin. The Archbishop made the remarks during a conference examining synodality and curial reform, where he reflected on how his own thinking on the issue has developed. He said, as a bishop, I have also learned that this is not just a demand of some left-leaning women's groups. He added that his encounters at parish level have shaped that conclusion, insisting that the concern is more widespread than is sometimes suggested. When I speak with women in parishes, 90% share the same opinion, he says. Look, it's not just the opinion of, women in parishes. I've pointed out numerous times, we now have bishops, Catholic bishops, concelebrating with female clergy openly in Italy and elsewhere with no discipline coming from Rome, no excommunications, no rebukes, open celebration. We just saw 6 bishops and hundreds of priests concelebrating with a female priestess. I think she was Lutheran. We saw Pope Leo himself at the Colosseum in Rome invite a whole bunch of non-Catholic clergy. And who else did he invite? Not only female priests, but one of them was a lesbian. And he's praying right next to her, if you go and check the photos. First time in history we've ever seen the Pope pray the Our Father together with a lesbian female priestess. So the conversation has now reached Rome. The conversation has now reached the Catholic Church, and it's no longer just kind of like an Anglican thing. Back in the day, Anglicans could just say, well, let me seek refuge in Rome if I don't like this women's ordination stuff. Now they're coming to Rome and saying, uh-oh, that same debate that I was dealing with over in Anglicanism is now here. And they're getting really, really concerned because it's at the highest levels. And there's almost kind of a head nod to some of this stuff in practice. So it's a serious issue that's taking place. So maybe keep that in mind. If there's anybody out there kind of trying to be triumphant, maybe gently remind them that, this is a battle that you're going to have to be fighting right here in the Catholic Church, and you might want to hold off on dunking on others. And I say that not just for any of the online Catholics, but also the online Eastern Orthodox. Gosh, every one of the objections that they have against Anglicanism, Catholicism, whatever, you can find those same problems in Eastern Orthodoxy. Those same debates are there. They're taking place as well. Maybe they're not as aggressive right now, but they will be. Modernism and modernity is coming to every group out there, and every group is going to have to deal with it and fight it. And the Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, they're not an exception. They're also going to have to deal with it. Anyways, those are the thoughts that I wanted to sneak in on the matter. Love to hear from you on this question. Make sure to put your thoughts there in the comment section. And of course, hit the subscribe button. Plenty more to come. If y'all want to see more live streams, also let me know in the comment section. I'd be happy to do more. We'll see you later. God bless.